The office was quiet in the late evening, the usual hustle and chatter of the workday replaced by the low hum of the building's air conditioning. I sat at my desk, tapping away at the keys, my focus split between finishing the last few emails of the day and the meeting I had scheduled with my boss, Mr. Donovan. It was unusual for him to call me into his office this late. But then again, there had been whispers about an upcoming promotion that had everyone on edge. I'd been gunning for that promotion for months, ever since word had gotten out that a senior executive position would be opening up. I knew my work had been solid. I'd put in the hours, taken on extra projects, and proven myself. I could feel it. This could be my break. But there was always an unspoken tension when it came to Mr. Donovan. He was everything you'd expect from a high-level executive. Sharp, ambitious, and handsome in a way that was hard to ignore. His tailored suits fit him like a glove, his dark hair always perfectly styled, and the way he moved through the office, with total confidence and control, drew everyone's attention, mine included. I'd be lying if I said I hadn't thought about him in ways that had nothing to do with work. Late nights like this, with the office half empty and the two of us staying behind after hours, made it hard not to think about the way he looked at me sometimes, like he knew more than he was letting on. I straightened my tie, glanced at the clock, and finally stood up. The butterflies in my stomach were hard to ignore as I approached his office, which was nestled at the far end of the executive wing, far away from the main floor. The door was slightly ajar, the light from his desk lamp casting a soft glow into the hallway. I knocked, waiting for the usual authoritative voice to invite me in. Come in? There it was, that low, smooth voice that had made my heart skip a beat on more than one occasion. I opened the door and stepped inside, feeling a strange mixture of nerves and anticipation. Mr. Donovan sat behind his desk, his fingers laced together, and his sharp blue eyes locked onto me as soon as I entered the room. He was sitting back in his chair, the top few buttons of his shirt undone, revealing the slightest hint of the toned body beneath. He looked relaxed, almost too relaxed. Have a seat, he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. I nodded, sliding into the seat and folding my hands in my lap, trying not to look as tense as I felt. Thank you, I said, my voice sounding steadier than I expected. There was a brief silence as Mr. Donovan leaned forward slightly, his gaze never leaving mine. I assume you know why I asked you here. The promotion, I answered quickly. I've been working hard to. He held up a hand, stopping me mid-sentence. I know how hard you've been working. You're one of the best we've got here. And I'll be frank with you, there's no one else in this office more qualified for the promotion than you. My heart leapt at those words, but something in his tone made me pause. There was a but hanging in the air. But, he continued, his voice dropping slightly, there's more to it than just qualifications. I blinked, unsure of where this was going. What do you mean? Mr. Donovan stood up from his desk and moved around to the front, leaning against the edge, his posture casual, but his eyes sharp, predatory even. He was close now, too close, and I could feel the tension between us growing. Let's not pretend we don't know what's really going on here, he said, his voice low and intimate. You want this promotion. You've earned it. But I need to know just how far you're willing to go to get it. I froze. My brain tried to process what he was implying, but it felt like the room had suddenly grown too warm, the air too thick to breathe properly. Excuse me? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Donovan smirked, a knowing smile playing at the corner of his lips. He pushed off from the desk and took a step closer, his eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that made my heart race. I've noticed the way you look at me, he continued, his voice soft but dripping with authority. The way your eyes linger a little too long. The way you react when I'm near. I opened my mouth to protest, to deny it, but the words wouldn't come. Because he was right. I had looked. I had fantasized. But this was different. He reached out, his hand brushing lightly against my tie, straightening it, before letting his fingers trail down to the buttons of my shirt. You're ambitious, he whispered. And ambition sometimes requires a personal touch. My pulse pounded in my ears as his fingers hovered just above my chest, his touch burning through the fabric of my shirt. This couldn't be happening. But it was, and as much as I wanted to deny it, there was a part of me a dark, dangerous part that wanted this, that had always wanted this. My voice was shaky, my mind spinning. Mr. Donovan leaned in closer, his breath warm against my ear. This promotion could be yours. You've earned it, but you have to show me just how much you want it. My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment, I didn't know what to do. This was wrong. It was inappropriate. But the way he touched me, the way he looked at me, made it impossible to think clearly. I can give you what you want, he murmured, his lips barely grazing the skin of my neck. All you have to do is say yes. The offer hung in the air, heavy and intoxicating. I knew the implications. I knew what he was asking. And I knew that if I said yes, nothing would ever be the same. But then again, this was the moment I had fantasized about. The moment where the lines between ambition and desire blurred into something much more dangerous. So that's a yes, then, he whispered, his lips inches from mine. Lucas looked in his eyes, and as he leaned in to kiss, something sharp rang in his ears. The next instant, Lucas's eyes opened to the familiar ceiling of his house, his alarm blaring. It was a dream, he muttered to himself, finding it hard to believe. The dream was vivid, too vivid. The intensity of it lingered as he jolted awake, his heart racing in his chest. Lucas sat up in bed, his sheets tangled around his legs as beads of sweat formed on his forehead. He stared at the ceiling, trying to steady his breathing, the dream replaying in his mind like a vivid memory. His boss, Mr. Donovan, had been at the center of it all. The touch, the tension, the way his boss had looked at him. Hungry, possessive. Lucas wiped a hand across his face and sighed. He was going crazy. This had to stop. He glanced at the clock. It was early, but he knew he wouldn't be able to get back to sleep now. He threw off the covers and dragged himself out of bed, heading to the bathroom to splash some cold water on his face. The coolness against his skin helped to pull him back into reality, but the remnants of the dream still clung to him, especially the way Mr. Donovan had looked at him in that dream. It wasn't entirely fabricated. There was something about the way Donovan had been gazing at him recently. Lucas had noticed it too. Though he had convinced himself, it was nothing more than a figment of his imagination. He stared at his reflection in the mirror. What was it about Mr. Donovan that made him so irresistible? Sure, he was attractive, confident, and always in control. But it was more than that. There was something about his boss's presence. Something that made Lucas's pulse quicken whenever they were in the same room. And it wasn't just physical attraction. It was something deeper, more intense, as if there was an unspoken connection between them. But that couldn't be, could it? Mr. Donovan was always so professional, so poised. Too poised, Lucas thought. With a shake of his head, Lucas dismissed the thought and focused on getting ready for work. He had another long day ahead of him, and he knew that staying late was becoming a habit, especially with the project deadlines looming. He grabbed a quick breakfast and left for the office, trying to shake off the lingering effects of the dream. The day went by in a blur. Meetings, emails, and client calls kept Lucas busy, though his thoughts continued to wander back to his boss. He kept catching himself thinking about that gaze, the way Donovan's eyes seemed to linger just a little too long on him whenever they spoke. It was probably just Lucas's imagination, but still, the intensity of it unnerved him. By the time evening rolled around, the office had mostly emptied out, and Lucas found himself working late once again. He wasn't surprised when he noticed the light still on in Mr. Donovan's office, as the man was known for his relentless work ethic. Lucas was focused on finishing a report when he heard his boss's deep voice call out from across the room. "Lucas, I need you to transfer the final data files to me before you leave." Lucas glanced up, seeing Mr. Donovan standing in the doorway of his office, his usual cool demeanor in place. He nodded and stood up, walking over as Donovan handed him a small pen drive. "I need all the project data transferred to this," Donovan said, his tone businesslike, but with an underlying edge of something Lucas couldn't quite place. "We need everything ready for the presentation tomorrow." Lucas took the pen drive and walked back to his desk, plugging it into his computer. As the drive popped up on his screen, his brow furrowed. The storage was full, completely filled to capacity, and the drive's icon was highlighted in red. That wasn't right. Confused, Lucas clicked on the drive to see what was taking up all the space. His eyes widened the moment the files loaded. It wasn't work data. It was something very, very different. Gay adult videos, dozens of them, were listed in front of his eyes, the thumbnails leaving little to the imagination. Lucas's heart jumped into his throat as his stomach dropped. He quickly tried to close the window, his hand shaking slightly on the mouse. Just as he was about to close it, he heard Mr. Donovan's voice, cold and serious, from behind him. "Do not plug it in. That's the wrong one." Lucas froze, his heart hammering in his chest. Slowly, he turned to face his boss, who stood just a few feet away. His face set in a stern expression, but his eyes were dark with something else, something Lucas couldn't quite read. "I am so sorry," Lucas stammered, standing up quickly, his hands held up defensively. "I didn't know. I didn't realize what." Mr. Donovan's eyes remained on Lucas, unreadable. The silence between them was thick, charged with tension. Lucas swallowed hard and blurted out the first thing that came to his mind. "I didn't know you were gay." The words hung in the air, awkward and heavy. Lucas immediately regretted saying it, but the look in Mr. Donovan's eyes changed in that moment. The stern facade cracked slightly, revealing a vulnerability Lucas had never seen before. "I am," Mr. Donovan admitted, his voice quiet, almost tired. He looked down for a moment, then back at Lucas. "But no one knows. No one here, at least." Lucas blinked, his mind spinning. Mr. Donovan, the man who commanded every room he walked into, who exuded confidence and authority, was gay. And no one knew? "I haven't told anyone," Donovan continued, his voice low. "It's complicated. I've spent so long building my career, my reputation, that coming out just never seemed like an option. And now, it feels like it's too late." Lucas remained silent, letting his boss speak, sensing that this was something Donovan had never shared with anyone. "I've tried to ignore it," Donovan said, running a hand through his hair. "But the truth is, I've been alone for a long time. And instead of facing it, I turned to things like this." He gestured to the computer, where the file directory of adult videos was still visible. Lucas looked at his boss, really looked at him, and saw something he hadn't expected: loneliness. The strong, unflappable man he'd admired for so long was, underneath it all, struggling with something so deeply personal that it shook Lucas to his core. "I'm sorry," Mr. Donovan said softly, his voice almost breaking. "I didn't mean for you to find out this way." Lucas's heart ached at the sight of his boss, this man he'd always admired, now standing before him vulnerable and exposed. He couldn't imagine how hard it must have been for Donovan to carry that weight alone for so long. "You don't have to apologize," Lucas said gently, taking a step closer. "It's okay. I understand." Donovan's eyes met Lucas's, and there was a flicker of something in his gaze. Relief, perhaps. "I've been out for a while now," Lucas continued, his voice soft but steady. "And I know how hard it can be. But trust me, it's not too late. You deserve to be happy, to live your life the way you want to." Donovan looked away, his jaw clenched. "I wouldn't even know where to start." "Let me help," Lucas offered, surprising himself with how genuine the words felt. "I know what it's like. I can show you how freeing it can be." For a moment, Donovan was silent, his eyes searching Lucas's as if trying to find the truth in his words. And then, slowly, he nodded. Over the next few weeks, things began to change. Lucas and Donovan spent more time together, not just at work, but outside of it too. At first, it was simple things: grabbing coffee, having lunch together, but slowly, their connection deepened. They talked about life, about their struggles, and for the first time, Donovan began to open up about his fears, about the part of himself he had kept hidden for so long. Lucas helped him navigate the things he had been too afraid to face, taking him to gay bars, introducing him to people who understood, showing him that there was a whole world out there waiting for him. And slowly, Donovan began to come out of his shell. The man who had always been so guarded, so controlled, began to relax, to smile more, to let his guard down. But beneath it all, there was always the tension between them, the unspoken attraction that had lingered from the very beginning. Lucas could feel it every time their eyes met, every time Donovan's hand brushed against his, every time they stood just a little too close to each other. It was raw at first, intense, but as their friendship deepened, that tension became something softer, something tender. It wasn't just about desire anymore. It was about trust, about connection, about finding someone who understood. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, they found themselves at Donovan's apartment. It had become a regular thing for them, sharing a bottle of wine, talking late into the night. But this time, something felt different. The air between them was charged with anticipation, as if they both knew that something was about to change. They sat on the couch, side by side, their knees almost touching. Donovan had been quieter than usual that evening, and Lucas could sense that there was something on his mind. Finally, after what felt like hours, Donovan spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've liked you for a long time," he admitted, his eyes downcast. "Longer than I should have." Lucas's heart skipped a beat, his chest tightening at the admission. He had suspected, of course, but hearing the words made everything feel real. "I felt the same way," Lucas replied softly, his hand reaching out to rest on Donovan's. "But I didn't want to push you." Donovan looked up, his eyes filled with emotion. "I wasn't sure if I could ever let myself have this," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "But with you, it feels right." Lucas's heart swelled, and before he could stop himself, he leaned in, his lips meeting Donovan's in a soft, tentative kiss. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of success. Their project was a resounding triumph, and everyone in the office could feel the buzz of victory in the air. Lucas knew that the promotion was coming, and when Donovan called him into his office one afternoon, he was ready for the news. Donovan leaned back in his chair, a playful smile tugging at his lips. "So," Lucas said with a grin, "am I getting the promotion or not?" Donovan raised an eyebrow, his smile turning into a smirk. "Do you really think it's that easy?" he teased, standing up and moving toward Lucas and playfully whispering in his ears. "You have to work your way up." Lucas chuckled as he leaned in, and he murmured against Donovan's lips, "I think I can manage that." And as the tension between them gave way to love and bliss, Lucas knew that this was only the beginning of both his career and his relationship with the man he had grown to care for deeply.